Captain Eli Rourke had always known that exploration was dangerous. The universe was vast, filled with wonders, but also with creatures and planets that could destroy a human in moments. Yet, nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he now faced. The jungle stretched endlessly, trees taller than skyscrapers, their leaves wide enough to block out the sun completely. Strange sounds echoed all around him, creatures he could not see moving in the shadows, the rustle of enormous leaves as if the forest itself were alive. Eli's heart raced. Every step he took was careful, measured, because even one wrong move could mean his death on this strange, alien world. He had been separated from his team during the exploration of the planet Giantesses. A sudden quake-like tremor had split the path they were following, and Eli had fallen behind while trying to save a drone from being destroyed by the falling rocks. Now, he was alone, with nothing but his backpack, a multi-tool, and his training to survive. Suddenly, a shadow fell over him. Eli looked up and his breath caught in his throat. Two figures stood in the clearing ahead of him. They were enormous, tall enough that their heads nearly touched the thick canopy above. Their skin shimmered slightly in the dim light, and their eyes glowed faintly. They were humanoid, but far beyond human size or strength. Each movement they made caused the ground to shake slightly, sending small rocks and dirt skittering across the jungle floor. Eli's first thought was fear. He knew he could not fight them. Even if he fired his energy blaster, it would barely scratch their skin. There was no running, no hiding. He was trapped in this clearing, facing two beings whose strength dwarfed his own. His training kicked in. He dropped to one knee, keeping his hands slightly raised to show he meant no harm. His mind raced, thinking of every survival strategy he had learned. "Hello," he called out, his voice trembling despite his effort to keep it steady. "I come in peace. I am alone. I mean no harm." The giantesses did not answer immediately. They tilted their heads slightly, as if studying him. Then, slowly, one of them stepped forward, each movement deliberate, careful, yet powerful enough to send vibrations through the ground. Eli instinctively moved back, but there was nowhere to go. As they came closer, he noticed something strange. They were not angry. They did not carry weapons or show signs of aggression. Their eyes were intelligent, curious. For a moment, he realized that he might be facing not enemies, but beings who were thinking. He remembered stories from human history, how often humans had been underestimated by other species. Perhaps, even now, his wit and courage could matter. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to speak again. "I am Captain Eli Rourke from Earth. I explore new worlds. I mean no harm. Please, I ask you to let me live." The second giantess stepped forward now, and her eyes met his. They glowed softly, and Eli felt as if they could see straight into his mind. He forced himself to stay calm, remembering every meditation exercise, every training drill he had ever practiced for moments of extreme fear. For long minutes the jungle was silent, save for the distant calls of alien birds and the rustling of the enormous trees. Eli could feel the giantesses' gaze like a weight pressing down on him. He gritted his teeth. This was it. Either they would end his life or they would decide otherwise. He took a slow, deliberate step backward, keeping his hands visible. "I am only human," he said, "but I have courage, I have intelligence, I can learn, I can help. I only ask for a chance." The larger of the two giantesses knelt slightly, bringing her glowing eyes closer to his. Eli could feel the warmth emanating from her, not hot but powerful in presence. He noticed a faint humming sound coming from them, like low vibrations through the air. His ears tingled. Then something remarkable happened. The giantesses began to communicate, not with words, but with images and feelings that flooded Eli's mind. At first, he was overwhelmed, visions of the planet, of its vast oceans, strange creatures, and floating islands. Then clearer thoughts emerged, curious. If these beings were the rulers of this world, or even just its guardians, his survival depended on more than just physical strength. He had to show them the human spirit. He straightened his back and spoke again, his voice firmer now. "I do not seek to harm your world. I only wish to explore it, to learn, to understand. Humans, we survive with our minds, not just our bodies. Please see me for who I am." The giantesses shifted their positions, moving slightly apart. Eli could feel the energy in the air change. It was not hostile anymore. It was cautious, curious testing. Eli realized that this was a test. Somehow they were judging him, not just for his strength, but for his courage, his ingenuity, his mind. And he knew that humans had faced overwhelming odds many times before. From the deserts of Earth to the depths of space, humanity had always used its intellect and courage to survive. He remembered an experiment he had once read about on Earth, a small creature faced with a predator. The creature could not match the predator's size, but it used clever thinking to escape. Perhaps this was his moment to show the same. "I will do what I can to prove myself," he said aloud. "Not with weapons, not with violence, but with my mind, with my courage. If you give me a chance, I will show you that humans are more than they seem." The larger giantess tilted her head again, as if considering his words. Then slowly she extended one enormous hand toward him. Eli froze, unsure if it was a gesture of trust or dominance. He took a careful step forward, his hand trembling, and placed his own in hers. The difference in size was unimaginable. His hand disappeared into hers entirely. Yet her touch was gentle, not crushing. The second giantess did the same, and Eli felt a warmth, a connection. Somehow he understood. They were testing him, yes, but they were also open to understanding him. Eli's mind raced. He had survived the first challenge, not by weapons, not by strength, but by courage and honesty, and he knew deep in his heart that this was only the beginning. As he stood there, dwarfed by two beings who could have ended his life in an instant, Eli felt something extraordinary. He was not defeated. Humanity had been placed in a situation that seemed impossible, yet, through intelligence, courage, and the willingness to connect, they could survive. The jungle around him seemed less threatening now. The rustling leaves and distant calls of alien creatures felt like background noise to the immense presence of the giantesses. And though he did not know what came next, Eli knew one thing for certain: he would face whatever challenge awaited with the same courage that had brought him this far. For the first time, he allowed himself a small smile. Humans had faced the unknown before. And maybe, just maybe, they could thrive even here, against beings far larger, far stronger, and far older than themselves. The giantesses looked down at him, their glowing eyes steady. And in that silent moment, a new understanding was born, an understanding that might change not just his fate, but the fate of all humanity. After the first encounter, Eli Rourke felt a strange mixture of relief and tension. The giantesses had not harmed him, but he understood that survival on this planet depended on more than courage. It required proving his intelligence, adaptability, and humanity. The two colossal beings stood silently, their eyes glowing softly, observing him. Then, without a word, they gestured for Eli to follow. Each step they took made the ground tremble, and Eli had to walk carefully, calculating each move so he would not stumble or cause the giantesses to trip. They led him deeper into the jungle. The canopy above grew thicker, letting only narrow beams of light fall on the alien flora. Strange flowers glowed faintly, and vines as thick as tree trunks twisted around the enormous roots. Every step felt like stepping into a completely unknown world. Eli realized that this was no ordinary encounter. The giantesses were intelligent beings, and everything they did seemed deliberate. They were testing him, not through words, but through actions, observing his reactions, his decisions, and his courage. Finally, they arrived at a massive chasm. The gap stretched wider than any canyon Eli had ever seen on Earth, and the bottom was hidden in swirling mist. On the far side, more alien jungle awaited, just as thick and dangerous as the one he had come through. Eli froze. He could see no bridge, no natural path to cross the chasm. Looking down, his stomach churned, but he also knew he could not back away. The giantesses watched silently, their glowing eyes fixed on him. He understood. They wanted to see how he would overcome the impossible. Taking a deep breath, Eli scanned the area. He noticed enormous vines hanging from the sides of the canyon. They were strong, thick, and flexible, swaying slightly in the wind. An idea formed in his mind. Using the vines, he could fashion a kind of rope bridge or swing himself across. He spoke aloud, partly to focus himself. "I have to use what is here. I have to think, not fight." Eli grabbed a vine and tested its strength. It held firmly. He began looping it around a sturdy root and then swung himself toward another vine on the other side. The first swing nearly threw him off balance, but he held on tightly, using every muscle in his body. The giantesses observed silently, their expressions unreadable. Step by step, swing by swing, Eli made it to the other side. When his feet finally touched solid ground, he exhaled a long breath. He had survived the first challenge using only his ingenuity and courage. The giantesses tilted their heads slightly, and Eli sensed a faint vibration in the air. an unspoken approval. It was as if they recognized his human ability to solve problems, even when strength alone could not help. "Good," Eli said softly, not fully understanding why he felt compelled to speak aloud. Perhaps it was to affirm his own survival, or perhaps to show the Giantesses that he was more than a frightened human. But the tests were not over. The Giantesses continued walking, and Eli followed. Soon, they arrived at a series of enormous stone structures, each carved with intricate patterns that glowed faintly in the alien light. The structures seemed to form a puzzle, doors, levers, and platforms that could only be activated in a certain order. Eli studied the patterns carefully. They did not resemble anything from human engineering, yet he noticed a pattern in the glowing symbols. His mind worked quickly, recalling training in logic, puzzles, and problem-solving from Earth. He reached out and touched a glowing symbol. The stone beneath his hand shivered, and a low hum filled the air. The first platform shifted slightly. Encouraged, Eli continued, carefully activating each symbol in sequence. It was not easy. The sequence required careful observation, intuition, and creativity. At one point, he almost chose the wrong symbol, which would have triggered a collapse of the entire platform. He paused, took a deep breath, and relied on his instinct. The platform held. The Giantesses watched, their glowing eyes fixed on him. They did not intervene. They were allowing him to demonstrate human intelligence in action, the ability to adapt, to learn quickly, and to persevere under pressure. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last platform moved into place. A doorway opened, leading deeper into the structures. Eli stepped through cautiously, and the Giantesses followed silently. Inside, the air was cooler, and the walls glowed faintly with energy. Strange writing covered the surfaces, shifting and changing as if alive. Eli approached carefully, running his hands over the walls. The symbols seemed to respond to his touch, forming patterns that suggested a message or perhaps a test. He realized the Giantesses wanted him to communicate, to show understanding. Using logic, deduction, and observation, Eli began to interpret the symbols. Slowly, a message formed in his mind. To survive, you must show courage, intelligence, and cooperation. Eli smiled faintly. Humans had always survived by working together and thinking creatively, even against impossible odds. He nodded to himself and then to the Giantesses, acknowledging their test. The next challenge was physical. The Giantesses led him to a large clearing where enormous boulders blocked a path. The rocks were too heavy for him to move alone, yet he could see no other way forward. Eli studied the terrain and noticed a series of smaller stones and vines. Using his knowledge of physics and leverage, he began constructing a simple mechanism to shift the boulders. It took time, patience, and ingenuity, but gradually he moved the first boulder just enough to create a small path. The Giantesses observed, their glowing eyes reflecting approval. Eli felt a surge of pride. Humanity had faced challenges before on Earth and in space. And now, even on this alien planet, he was proving that intelligence and courage could overcome obstacles that sheer strength could not. As he continued, the second Giantess approached, moving a small branch to test his response. Eli carefully avoided touching it, realizing that the Giantesses were observing every action, every choice mattered. He worked calmly, efficiently, and without hesitation, showing that humans could remain composed even in the most difficult situations. Finally, the path was clear. Eli stepped forward, and the Giantesses allowed him to continue deeper into the jungle. By now, he was no longer merely surviving. He was learning, adapting, and proving the worth of humanity in their eyes. Night began to fall, and the jungle grew darker. Strange bioluminescent plants lit the paths, casting eerie shadows across the ground. Eli felt fatigue, but he also felt determination. Every challenge he faced, every obstacle he overcame, was a testament to human ingenuity and courage. The Giantesses paused near a river, its water glowing faintly under the alien moonlight. One of them knelt, dipping her hand into the river. Eli noticed that the water responded to her touch, creating patterns and lights that moved like a dance. He realized that this, too, was a test, a challenge of observation and understanding, rather than strength. Eli studied the patterns carefully. By mimicking their movements and timing, he created a ripple in the water that matched the rhythm of the Giantesses' gestures. A low hum filled the air, and Eli sensed the energy around him shift. He had succeeded once more. The giantesses regarded him silently, their expressions unreadable but somehow approving. Eli felt a deep sense of connection. These beings, enormous and powerful, were not enemies. They were mentors, testers, and observers, evaluating what it meant to be human. As night fell fully, the giantesses settled near the river, and Eli followed, sitting carefully on a rock. He allowed himself a moment to breathe, to reflect. Humans had survived countless challenges through courage, intelligence, and cooperation. And now, even on this alien planet, those same qualities had allowed him to survive the first true tests. Eli understood something crucial. The giantesses were not merely testing him, they were assessing humanity itself. Every human trait he displayed, from problem-solving to patience, was being recorded in their minds. And if he continued to prove himself, perhaps humans could earn more than survival. They could earn trust, respect, and even friendship. He spoke quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Humans are small, weak, fragile, but we are also brave, clever, and willing to take risks. That is what matters. That is what defines us. The giantesses seemed to respond, tilting their heads and emitting a faint vibration that Eli felt in his chest. It was as if they recognized the truth in his words. For the first time, he felt that the impossible was becoming possible, not just surviving against giant beings, but showing that humanity could thrive, even in a world dominated by power far greater than his own. Night passed, and dawn arrived with a soft glow over the alien jungle. Eli knew that new challenges awaited him, but he also knew he was ready. Humans had always faced adversity with courage and intelligence, and today was no different. He rose to his feet, stretching his stiff muscles, and looked at the giantesses. They were enormous, intimidating, and wise, but he no longer feared them as he had before. He had faced their tests, used his mind, and survived, and that was only the beginning. The adventure was far from over, but Eli Rourke had learned something profound. Humanity's strength lay not in muscle or size, but in courage, intelligence, and the willingness to face the unknown with determination. And the giantesses, enormous and mysterious as they were, had chosen to acknowledge that strength. The sun rose over the alien jungle, casting golden light across enormous leaves and glowing flowers. Eli Rourke felt a strange mix of exhaustion and excitement. He had survived the first tests, proven his courage and intelligence, and now he knew that the most important part of his journey lay ahead. The giantesses, silent and immense, led him toward a massive clearing at the heart of the jungle. As they approached, Eli's eyes widened. The clearing was enormous, wider than any human city street, and at its center lay a stone platform covered with intricate carvings and glowing symbols. Around the platform, massive pools of water reflected the light, and the air shimmered with a soft energy. It was clear that this place was sacred, a site of judgment, or perhaps a place where decisions of great importance were made. The giantesses stopped at the edge of the clearing, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Eli's heart pounded. He knew this was the final test. Whatever happened here would decide his fate, and perhaps the fate of humanity's relationship with this alien world. One of the giantesses stepped forward, lowering her immense hand to the platform. The glowing symbols responded, shifting into patterns that formed a puzzle far more complex than any he had seen before. This was no test of strength. It was a test of comprehension, creativity, and human intuition. Eli approached cautiously, studying the patterns. They seemed to react to his thoughts and movements, almost as if they were alive. He realized that the giantesses were challenging him to understand not just the symbols, but the logic and rhythm behind them. It was a test of his mind, his ability to adapt and to see connections where none were obvious. He took a deep breath. He had faced impossible odds before, crossing chasms, solving puzzles, and moving massive boulders. This was another challenge, and he would approach it as he always did, with careful observation, logical reasoning, and determination. Eli began tracing the patterns with his fingers, following the glowing lines and connecting them in ways that felt natural. At first, nothing happened. The symbols remained static, unresponsive, but he persisted, analyzing the flow, the sequence, the rhythm. Slowly, the platform began to hum, and a faint light emanated from the carvings. A series of symbols floated above the platform, forming shapes that seemed almost alive. Eli's mind raced. He realized that this was not just a puzzle, it was a language, a way for the giantesses to communicate without words. Every movement, every connection he made showed understanding, intelligence, and respect for the beings before him. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, casting changing shadows over the platform, and Eli continued working tirelessly. He adapted, corrected mistakes, and learned from every small failure. The giantesses watched, their eyes glowing steadily, as if they were measuring his persistence, patience, and ability to learn under pressure. Finally, with a careful motion, Eli completed the sequence. The platform glowed brightly, and the carvings shifted to form a doorway. A gentle hum filled the clearing, vibrating in his chest, as if acknowledging his success. He stepped back, exhausted but triumphant. The giantesses moved closer. One knelt, placing her hand on the glowing doorway. Through the vibrations and images he now felt in his mind, Eli understood their message. They were offering him a choice. This world could be hostile, but it could also become a place of alliance and learning. They could destroy him, or they could teach him, and through him learn about humanity. Eli's heart raced. He realized the magnitude of this moment. Humans had faced challenges before, but never on a world like this, never with beings so powerful and wise. And now the choice was not just theirs, it was his. He could accept fear, retreat, and leave the planet with only memories of danger. Or he could step forward, trust in his intelligence, courage, and humanity, and accept the chance to build something extraordinary. Taking a deep breath, Eli spoke aloud, though he knew the giantesses understood him without words. "I choose to learn, to understand, to show you what humanity can be." The giantesses responded immediately. The air shimmered and the doorway widened. Eli could see inside a chamber filled with glowing symbols, artifacts, and knowledge that seemed far beyond human understanding. He stepped forward cautiously, feeling the weight of the moment. Every human he represented, every choice humanity had made to survive and explore was in this step. Inside, the chamber was breathtaking. Towers of energy rose from the ground, flowing like rivers of light. Symbols rotated and shifted, forming patterns that spoke of science, art, philosophy, and history, not just of the giantesses' world, but of the universe itself. Eli realized that they were offering him knowledge, a chance to understand their civilization, and perhaps to share humanity's own achievements in return. The first giantess spoke, not in words but in images and feelings. Eli saw visions of their history, how they had grown to enormous size, learned to manipulate energy, and mastered understanding of the universe. Yet despite their power, they sought wisdom from others, recognizing that knowledge was more than strength. Eli felt a surge of pride for humanity. Humans were small, fragile, and limited in power, but they had curiosity, courage, and creativity, traits that allowed them to explore, adapt, and survive. And now, these qualities had earned him recognition from beings far greater than himself. The second giantess reached out, touching his shoulder. The sensation was like a gentle vibration, and Eli felt a rush of understanding. They were not simply accepting him, they were acknowledging humanity itself. This was more than survival. It was respect, trust, and the possibility of friendship. Eli realized that humans had always thrived by learning, adapting, and connecting with others. This moment was a culmination of those qualities. Fear had been his first instinct, but courage and intelligence had guided him to success. And now, humanity had a place in a world that seemed impossible at first glance. As he explored the chamber, Eli noticed small objects and devices that could transform understanding of physics and energy. The giantesses allowed him to observe, to study, and even to touch some of the artifacts. He understood that trust had been granted, not carelessly, but because he had proven the human spirit. Hours passed as Eli examined the knowledge before him. Each discovery, each connection, reinforced the lesson that humans could achieve more than their size or strength might suggest. Intelligence, creativity, courage, and moral choices could open doors that brute force never could. When he finally emerged from the chamber, the giantesses were waiting. Their eyes glowed with quiet approval. Eli felt a bond forming, an unspoken connection between human and giantess, between two species separated by size but united by understanding and respect. The journey back through the jungle was different now. Eli walked with confidence, no longer fearful of the massive beings beside him. He had faced impossible odds and survived, not through weapons or strength, but through the qualities that defined humanity. Along the way, he observed the alien world more clearly. Strange creatures moved peacefully, unaware of his presence. Glowing plants lit the paths. The planet, which had once seemed threatening, now felt full of life, intelligence, and possibility. By the time they reached the edge of the jungle where Eli's team had been searching for him, he was exhausted but exhilarated. He had not only survived, he had demonstrated the power of human courage, intelligence, and adaptability. The giantesses paused, their massive forms silhouetted against the alien sky. They communicated one final message, one of partnership. They would allow humans to explore the planet safely, to learn, and to share knowledge. In return, they would observe, guide, and cooperate with humanity in a spirit of mutual respect. Eli felt a deep sense of gratitude. He understood that this moment was historic, not just for him, but for all humans. A species often underestimated for size and strength had earned recognition from beings far greater than themselves, not through dominance, but through courage, intelligence, and the willingness to face the unknown. When he rejoined his team, they could barely believe the story. Eli's eyes shone with excitement and determination. "They tested me," he said, "and they chose differently than I expected. They recognized what humans can do." The team listened in awe as Eli described the giantesses, the challenges, and the chamber of knowledge. Every word reinforced the same truth. Humans could survive and thrive, even in worlds far beyond their understanding, through courage, intelligence, and moral choices. That night, as Eli lay under the alien stars, he reflected on everything he had learned. The planet was no longer a threat, it was an opportunity. And humanity, small and fragile though it might seem, had earned a place in a larger universe through its most enduring traits. Eli smiled. Fear had been the first step, but courage had guided him. Intelligence had unlocked doors, and moral choices had earned trust. Humanity had faced giants and survived, not by fighting, but by showing the qualities that made them extraordinary. And for the first time, Eli truly believed that no matter how small or fragile humans might seem, they could face the unknown, earn respect, and even thrive among the greatest beings in the universe. The giantesses watched silently from a distance, their glowing eyes calm and approving. They had made a different choice, not one of destruction, but one of partnership. And through that choice, they had shown that even the most powerful beings could recognize the strength of the human spirit. Eli's heart swelled with hope. The universe was vast, filled with challenges and unknowns. But humanity, with its courage, intelligence, and determination, was ready. And this was only the beginning.